During her 66 years in Singleton, Margaret Howlett made many friends. Today they gathered with her family at All Saints Anglican Church in High Street for her funeral. Mrs Howlett was highly regarded in the community. She was known as a kind and caring woman who would do anything for anyone. It's those attributes which will always be remembered, especially by her many grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
We're sad you had to leave us so soon, it's not fair. We know you'll be happy in heaven, but we are going to miss you a lot. We love coming to visit you. You are always smiling and glad to see us. We will love you forever. Amen.
Those sentiments were echoed by the congregation, so large that many were forced to stand outside. As one, though, they remembered a lady known as Peggy, who had filled their lives with smiles and happy memories.
The art gallery has been converted into a makeshift home. The armchair view through these windows is of Central Australia.
Well, we're just trying to bring people into the environment, the arid zone, but make them feel as though they're comfortable in their own living room.
The paintings are done by husband and wife team Anne Llewellyn and Herbert Heinrich. They've married their artistic talents by both painting on the one canvas to create the final image.
We tend to decide what we'd like to paint in that image. Sometimes I'd like to do a bird, Herbert might like to do the tree or whatever.
And there are no arguments about what goes where.
I think it's just a matter of the compatibility of two people. Anne and I have found that we're extremely compatible in all walks of our life.
The exhibition officially opens tomorrow. Jane Anderson, NBN News. The Seniors Expo is designed to give older people information about a range of topics. However, instead of just catering for the frail-aged person, the Expo is targeting the growing number of agile elderly people.
More people are now planning their retirement earlier, easing into retirement, perhaps going into part-time work rather than full-time work.
The Expo was officially opened by Virginia Chadwick. Private enterprise, government and community services are all represented, offering advice on everything from finance to entertainment.
It provides interaction between community groups, information on services that are available from government, and I think also ideas for recreational and leisure activities.
The Expo will be on again tomorrow at Newcastle City Hall.
That are available from government, and I think also ideas for recreational and leisure activities.
The Expo will be on again tomorrow at Newcastle City Hall. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Today's turnout in Weston was the largest seen in the town since the end of World War II, and it was all for 76-year-old Coogan Frame. The one-time miner and strong supporter of the community was given the honour of Freeman of the City by Mayor Marie Callaghan. And it was applause well earned. Most recently, Coogan was involved in trying to save Western's Commonwealth Bank from closure. He was even arrested after a sit-in at the branch. He took part in the picket line at Wallsend Hospital and has campaigned for improvements to Curry Hospital. He has fought long and hard to keep mines in the area opened, earning the respect of the country's 20,000 coal miners.
We've often seen this hall full of angry miners. That's gone. Coogan was part of that. I think the town turned out today in such numbers to honour its tradition and honour the bloke who's more connected to that tradition than anybody else in the town.
He's given everything he has to give to us, and it was the highest honour that we could give in return.
It was a proud day for Coogan and his family. While he's never short of a word, for the first time, Coogan Frame was a little overcome by all the attention.
So I'm a very emotional person, to be honest, but I had to hold that back today. There's too many people looking.
The no confidence motion in the Mayor came amid assertions by Councillor John Wheat that the decision not to re-employ 2 senior council officers was not based on merit. Health and Building Director John Chadban and Planning Director Doug Betts were told they wouldn't be re-employed last week. Public opinion over the sackings boiled over at the council chambers today when council voted to close its meeting to the public to thrash out the matter. The meeting and discussion on the Mayor's future is still in progress.
I have received the support of the majority of councillors to make that motion, and it was with great regret that we took that decision.
Probably the motion that shocked me more than anything was that the whole business of the no confidence motion be dealt with in staff and management. Of course, staff and management excludes the gallery, excludes all the people, and it's my view that it should have been held in open council. The Mayor herself wanted it held in open council. Now, she has been outvoted on this particular point, and I believe it's disgraceful.
Although 3-year-old Matthew may be a long way from getting his licence, he's already practising. This brightly coloured foot-powered vehicle is not only a winner with toddlers, it was judged overall Toy of the Year against hundreds of other contenders at Sydney's International Toy and Hobby Fair.
Ecstatic. Really, really pleased. The effort, our staff and everybody's put in it was rewarded.
John's company, Dingbats, is no stranger to success. Last year it took out Best Australian-made product at the fair for these dinosaurs. Not a bad effort for a company after its first year of operation. With a strong demand for the toys overseas, production lines at the Newcastle factory are running hot. These building blocks are soon to be released. So too this electric-powered kids' sports car.
We already have orders for overseas, plus displays now, as we're talking in Hong Kong, and agreements in place for Europe, America, England.
And happy to roll along with all the success, some toddlers know when they're sitting on a winner.
Was it good fun, Matthew?
No.
There was a compulsory smoker called to calm the nerves in the voting room after 32-year-old Danny Baldwin received the phone call from the lottery's office this morning. A shortage of staff meant Danny couldn't take the rest of the day off, even though his knees were trembling, but he'll be making up for that.
I'll be celebrating tonight, and I already know in there that I probably won't be at work tomorrow.
Danny is not planning any great changes to his life. He's very settled in his job as a meat slicer and as a force in the local fishing club, and is yet to find the right girl to think about any ideas of marriage, but does have plans for his newfound wealth.
Looking to buy my mother's house and letting her enjoy her retirement now. She can spend the money and I'll get the house. I'll invest it that way.
Mother, Irene Baldwin, has also put it on Danny to spend a few of his new dollars on a couple of tons of wood to counter Inverell's sudden cold snap.
This is where Ampol will re-establish its operations. The move from Tighes Hill will cost the company around $10 million. Because of the proximity to residences at Tighes Hill, Council has long encouraged the city's petroleum industries to shift to Kooragang.
There are some that we would like, and you've heard about the oil tank farms. We'd like them to all go to Kooragang, and we've set in process a task force that will achieve that.
Also relocating an LP gas storage and distribution terminal currently operated in Hamilton by Boral. 2 100-tonne storage tanks will be built on this land, costing the company around $17 million. And the industries flocking to Kooragang don't end there. Newcastle Council also approved last night a $1 million ammonia packaging plant by ICI Australia. It will be operated on land owned by Incitec. Lord Mayor John McNaughton says the city welcomes the business but denies it will only worsen pollution.
We've been most concerned as a council, I think the first in Australia, to examine the cumulative effects of air and water pollution when different industries establish. And we have measures for that now, and this works very well.
When Starstruck burst onto the stage last year, the best of the Hunter's young talent was on show. This year, organisers say the production will aim for the same high standard of performance, but a few additions are in store.
You can look forward to an expanded choir of 500, which is marvellous. As far as the effects go, we're going to have a giant wedding cake that'll be part of our theme of family, and that'll be about 6 metres high. We're still working out how to get it onto the floor.
Following an international lead, this year's theme will centre around the family.
We'll be looking at the family in all its diverse forms. We've divided the show up into 10 segments, and we will have segments, for example, on our multicultural family. We'll have a street family. We'll have a neighbourhood that will have all the sorts of families that we all have to live with. And we'll also be having our Starstruck family, which of course is the whole cast and some special guests.
Starstruck opens at the Entertainment Centre on May 24.
The current 800-metre runway at Warnervale is only suitable for light aircraft. However, Wyong Council intends asking for expressions of interest next week to double the runway's size.
For a long time now, this council has been of the view that we should have a regional airport on the Central Coast. We have the support of Gosford City Council, which is good news, so we hope to develop it as a regional airport of particular worth, of course, to the Central Coast for commuters and also, of course, for industry.
Development plans for the 105-hectare site have already been approved by Council. All that's needed now is a tenderer with $6 million to spare.
About a month ago we had a delegation from Asia who are very interested, and I've got no doubt they'll be putting in a submission.
The successful bidder will also be offered an adjacent 50-hectare industrial estate. The advantages of being close to the airport and the subsequent savings in freighting costs is expected to be a high selling point of the industrial area. Interested developers have 3 months to apply. Council expects the full airport development to be built by the year 2000.
This cattail starts and finishes at Newcastle's Salvation Army hostel. Penny the Puss was the pet and companion of the hostel's homeless men. But one day, Penny went missing without as much as a meow or a trace of fur.
It started when we had builders come in to do some renovations in the place. Ripped floors up, and poor old cat was a bit scared of the lot of it and disappeared, and we thought she'd disappeared for good.
The hostel was searched from room to room without success. The only reminder of the furry friend, the stacks of uneaten cat food and the milk bottles that had grown to a small dairy. There were no suspects in the case of the missing feline, except for 2 residents who showed no signs of remorse. But finally, 3.5 weeks after she went missing, the penny dropped. The missing moggy had been there all the time, under the floorboards the search party had been walking on, accidentally concreted in by workers. A hole was cut in the floor and she was given her freedom. The only ill effects was a drop in her weight, which wasn't such a bad thing for Penny, who had reached Garfield proportions.
Well, according to the vet that we took her to the day after we got her out, the overweight sort of kept her alive, but if we'd have kept feeding her the way she had been fed, we probably would have killed her with kindness.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News. The simulation of real-life crises was conducted atop a wheat loader at Carrington Basin. The scenario was an injured worker who couldn't make it on his own to emergency help. A pulley system was constructed to help ease the patient to safety and medical attention. Rescue officers and paramedics worked side by side to ensure the mock rescue went off without a hitch. The high winds added realism to the difficulty, but the ambulance officers wouldn't like it any other way.
With the wind being here today, that's quite interesting because on previous days that we've done these simulations, it's been nice, calm weather, and it adds a bit of, I guess, a bit of variety into the work that we can do, and in fact it could happen at any time with the weather the way it is today.
The emergency crews also practice abseiling with a rope bag, which prevents the cord being entangled on descent. The method is used in cliff rescues, where officers are jumping into the unknown.
It could be used in situations where you don't know what's below you. At a cliff, you don't know what's below. If you're abseiling into an area where there in fact may be a tree canopy, you want to try and break the canopy, and the rope could in fact get tangled up otherwise if you weren't using the rope bag technique.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Some, it's the very first time. Some are guys that play basketball every afternoon, but they've seen the video clips and there's lots more guys dancing, so they've shown an interest and they've come and they've worked really hard.
Choreographer Joanne Thorne is confident she can get them into shape, ready for their grand debut at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre on May 23.
The land causing all the furore is 280 hectares between the New England Highway and Thornton Road. Last year, developers faced fierce opposition from conservationists wanting to preserve the land instead of creating a light industrial estate. When council withdrew its initial support, developers took the matter to the Land and Environment Court.
This council had a change of heart over some environmental issues which can be addressed and which we are very prepared to address.
But a new player has emerged. This week, the Department of Corrective Services asked Council's help to find a suitable location for a weekend periodic detention centre for both men and women detainees.
In my book, it's ideally located, ideally situated. It has all the attributes that the Department of Corrective Services look for in such a parcel of land to develop a corrective centre.
Earmarked for closure is the Tomago Detention Centre, which Corrective Services says has outgrown its usefulness. Part of the reason Corrective Services wants to close the centre is the lack of public transport available to inmates. But the convenient location of the proposed site is creating concerns in other areas. According to developer Hilton Grusian, residents are already worried that detainees arriving on a Friday afternoon will share the same train rides with school students.
The feedback we're getting is that the opposition will be rather more intense than anything we've known to this point.
It's an event that draws thousands of steam enthusiasts to the Hunter, and this year there's a special attraction. After 11 years under shelter, one of the former South Maitland Railway steam locos, number 18, will once again take its place on the tracks.
The 18 is going to be teamed with the 3112 so that people will be able to travel along the line and have a look. And there's also a special photographer's bus that's going to leave prior to the train and will go to vantage points along the line.
Built in 1915, the loco is only one of many drawcards planned for the two-day event.
The Richmond Vale Railway will be running, and they have a museum there. Also Rothbury Wright Museum. Walker Waterworks also has a huge program of events.
This year, Steamfest officially launches Heritage Week, where the streets of Maitland and Morpeth will take on an historic look for a full program of daily activities.
After all, Maitland is the Heritage Centre of New South Wales, and we'd like to promote that.
The company met workers' representatives this morning to detail the effects of the completion of the Tangara project, which will now be stalled until November next year by reducing output from one carriage every 3 days to one every 5.
Unfortunately, some people will be asked to volunteer, but the skilled workforce will be here through all of 1995, where contracts we're currently bidding will be determined this year and will need those skills in 1995.
Even then, Mr Fitzgerald admits that the good times are over at Broadmeadow, with Gunninan expanding operations in other parts of the country, but never again to be as large a force in heavy manufacturing locally.
A contract such as Tangara will not come along in the future. Other contracts will hold together our core skills, but will not be able to maintain as large a workforce as we've had for the previous 7 years.
Neither the company nor the union would disclose details of the severance pay being offered, except to say that it conforms to an enterprise bargaining agreement reached in 1992.
We're waiting for those expressions to come in, and then there'll be further negotiations with the unions if there's to be any forced redundancies.
As well as the Tangara trains, the Sprinter project for the Victorian Railways will wind down before the end of this year, with Gunninan pinning its hopes for Newcastle on future Australian National Rail locomotives and other railway work.
The incident occurred midway through the first half. A touch judge made a report of the tackle and Ainscough will know his fate at 9:30 tonight. Despite the sighting, coach David Waite was a relieved man today, in charge of a team that has jumped from 15th to 9th on the table.
Desperate game for us. I'm sure the crowd realised that, but I'm sure the crowd realised that the football team has played very, very well here at Marathon Stadium this year, and they've lost in a couple of close ones, and they won reasonably convincingly yesterday.
Matthew Johns had another outstanding game at 5/8. He scored a try and set up another one, pushing for a selection in the country squad.
Any young player playing well from the country is a dark horse, and Matthew is, in my opinion, a dark horse for the spot, depending on injuries and form of other players. But I also said that he wouldn't let anyone down because he's a talented young player.
A certainty for country honours is prop Paul Harrigan. The Chief is the team's leading try scorer, posting his 4th try yesterday.
Well, the way he scores them is nice and handy. It's nice and close to the try line, and he tends to find a poorer defender in front of him occasionally and gets away with the 4-pointers. But he's got an on-running battle with a few of his counterparts in the team. He's very pleased to be leading the try scoring at the moment. I suppose it reflects that he wasn't a centre in his youth.
And a milestone was reached by Captain Robbie McCormack. It was the well-respected hooker's 100th game.
He's played 100 games in first grade for this club and hasn't played a bad one, so that probably summarises my views of the Moth.
The flu strikes many of us each winter. Some soldier on relatively unaffected, others are not so lucky.
It's a very dangerous virus that can cause very severe illness in a lot of people. Young people, when they get influenza, get over it and with no complications. But the people who are over 65, those with a chronic illness, they suffer a lot of complications from influenza.
The North West Public Health Unit has launched a campaign in Moree to highlight the need for people to understand the importance of immunising against the virus.
Protection in the community is not high enough to prevent a large outbreak of influenza. We may or may not see it this year, but we definitely wouldn't see it if everybody in the at-risk group were protected from influenza.
Often the flu is seen as a harmless fact of winter. Those in the high-risk group are being strongly urged to consult their doctor about a flu vaccine.
It's a very safe vaccine. It takes about 2 weeks to work, and winter is the danger time for influenza, and we're only just a couple of weeks away from winter now.
Amanda Bolger, NBN News.
Superintendent Ian Cleary was transferred from Newcastle during the investigation of an incident which occurred in November on the South Strait in which Udo Fries was arrested. Superintendent Cleary had gone to the floating restaurant after a call from his daughter who worked there. The charges against Mr Fries were later dropped. Member for Charlestown Richard Face has continued to ask questions in Parliament concerning the events of that night after claims by Superintendent Cleary's wife that the incident was related to a crackdown on local brothels. In Parliament last night, Mr Face raised allegations that 4 of the people involved in the South Strait incident had in fact visited Newcastle brothels. He told Parliament that the information came from an informant who he would not name, but who had signed a statutory declaration. Mr Face has called for the allegations to be thoroughly investigated. He's also made a startling claim that he and his family feel threatened because of his involvement in the matter.
There have been many people, it's never come to me, have told me to beware and to watch out for myself and that I should be concerned. But it won't stop me.
Andrew Bogue told the court that in 1992, some months before Mark Alley was bashed and his body dumped off a bush track at Spears Point, he too had been viciously beaten. Bogue said a man called Wayne Newton, with whom he and Mark Alley had shared heroin, had lured him to an open space at Nord's Wharf. In the presence of another man, he bashed Bogue about the head and body with a metal bar. You couldn't recognise my face. No nose, no eyes, no throat, just completely swollen up. Bogue believed he was bashed by Newton over the theft of a marijuana plant, but told the court he hadn't stolen it. Bogue's former girlfriend, Natalie Horn, said she was fearful of Newton. She'd seen him covered in blood when he brought Andrew Bogue back to their home after the bashing. She also told the court she'd heard stories about how Mark Alley had died, that he'd been bashed and his body dumped after buying drugs on the Central Coast. The inquest into Mark Alley's death will continue in July. Jane Anderson, NBN News. Sewage from the western side of Lake Macquarie and Belmont Treatment Plant will be discharged further out to sea when the new outfall at Belmont starts operating tomorrow. The multi-million-dollar project has been successfully trialled this week.
The most important benefit of the whole thing is that you're not getting effluent from septic tanks leaching into Lake Macquarie. Instead, what's happening is we're picking it up over on the western side of the lake, treating it and then disposing it well out to sea.
Meanwhile, the Hunter Water Corporation is also urging residents in the Williams catchment area to remain vigilant about reducing the amount of phosphorus running into the river. Phosphorus promotes the growth of blue-green algae, and the Williams is a major source of drinking water for the lower Hunter. After the last fall of rain, phosphorus levels were too high for the corporation to pump the water into the Grahamstown Dam.
Necessary for the community up there to cooperatively look at ways of reducing phosphorus runoff so that we are able to pump when we get a decent rainfall event, and therefore we can put water into the storage so that people in Newcastle can drink it.
Grahamstown Dam is at 70% capacity. The aim now is to store enough water for next summer. Jane Anderson, NBN News. When designing a home, few people appreciate the importance of the sun, according to solar architect Gareth Cole.
The sun should be able to enter every part of the house. There's an old Italian proverb that says, where the sun does not enter, the doctor does.
Architecture students packed an auditorium at Newcastle University to get some advice about designing buildings which best utilise the sun.
It's the colours that we choose for the buildings. If you choose light colours, they reflect. Dark colours absorb. If you put where you put your glass, it has to be on the northern side. Don't put east and west glass in the building.
The university is offering students training in this field to meet a perceived need. It says more people want homes which are energy efficient and use environmentally sustainable building materials.